Anyway, we're recording now, and here we have Scott Strong-Wallace of Mount Carmel Yarns. Just like actually most of the people I sucker into doing these interviews. I found Scott on Instagram, and he has some really, really beautiful yarns there. I mean, I don't go into falsetto. Well, actually, I do all the time, but it's great stuff that he has. So I've only done one other yarn dyer before, and so I've only other interviewed one other yarn dyer
Yes,
before. I should clarify. Yeah.
yes, clarify.
Yes. But yeah. So this is really cool. So tell us all about yourself.
Well, let's see. I'm a little too old to go all about myself, but I'll give you the basic highlights. Um, let's see. I live in Wichita, Kansas, center of the United States. Lived here about 2 years, spent 30 years in Kansas City, Missouri. My upbringing is from rural Kansas, out in southwest Kansas, near Dodge City. Went to college in Lindsborg, Kansas, which is just north of here. It's a little Swedish community where I studied music, music education. Which, yes, I have a sense that that's something important to you.
So,
Went there and did music education and English. Went to Kansas City from there to study conducting. Ran out of funds, had to start paying my way in the real world, and then kind of from there, the rest is history in terms of my music career. But I still love music. It's still a key aspect of who I am and how I operate in the world.
okay, if I didn't want to marry you before this interview, I do now. But then how did you get into yarn and specifically into yarn dyeing?
Well, okay, so in 2005, it was shortly after the Christmas holiday season. Was sitting around my home, reflecting on how was spending my free time, which at the time was done primarily, gaming on Xbox and stuff like that. And I kept thinking, you know what, I'm spending all this time and there's nothing I can show for it. So he's like, you know what, I need to do something more. So I just on a whim, I said, I'm going to teach myself how to knit. So I went and got a Lion brand Learn to Knit kit, which had the yarn, the needles, everything I needed, brought it home, popped up YouTube in 2005 to find, I used the instructions in the kit as well as YouTube videos, taught myself how to knit, and have never put the needles down since. My fiber journey in terms of that was pretty much big box stores and Lion brand yarns and Karen cakes and all that kind of stuff. And
Karen 1 pound and Red Heart Super Saver.
Yes, all those lovely yarns.
All the things we look down on now.
Which have an absolute, I still use those types of yarns.
Mm-hmm. They have their place.
Exactly, they have their place. They have their use, and really over the years they've become really quite lovely to work with. But one of the aspects of it that I've learned is that in the use of them and in the washing of them, they give off microfibers into the environment, which can be harmful to aquatic animals, especially.
I didn't really know that.
Yeah. So and me being a little bit of a greenie type of person, I recycle a lot, and I use I don't use a lot of reusable plastics or one single-use plastics, but so I started thinking, okay, I want to move my stash from primarily acrylic-based yarns into more natural
Plant and
fibers,
animal fibers, yeah.
proteins and cellulose type fibers. But one of the aspects of that is there's an expense to that transition, which I always envied people that could purchase those. I envied yarn snobs and secretly wanted to be one.
Exactly.
So sort of the beginning of that journey was I bought a skein of natural colored, just basics, not bleached white, but the Lion brand fisherman's wool.
I have some of that. Somebody gave me a whole bunch of it that I'm going to make a sweater out of in a few weeks.
Oh, and it's great for that. But I got some of that, and then I had read somewhere on the internet you can dye yarn with Kool-Aid, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna try that. That sounds like fun. So I got some Kool-Aid packets and skeined it up or made it into a hank, which I had to do using chairs and all that kind of thing. Not having a nitty naughty, not really being that deep into fiber yet. So I had to, use a chair to make it into these, the loop that I needed. And then, had some like cherry, lemon, and orange Kool-Aid and dyed it in these 3 colors, not knowing what I was doing or how it worked, but it did. And it's, and the color stayed, and I was like, okay, this is fun. And I knitted a couple of things out of it. Which I thought was really cool. It's like, and the thing is, it really smelled like Kool-Aid for like a long time. So that it worked, but it was like, okay, that was cool, but it was a lot of work. And I don't know that I want to continue down that path very long. Fast forward to 2019. Well, yeah, end of 2019. I had started my path of moving my stash ever so slowly into a more natural fiber world, and I joined Knit Crate, which is a subscription-based yarn box type thing, and I started getting those. I got a couple months. And then May comes along May of 2020 comes along. The pandemic's just starting to roar into true power, and things are shut down. Well, Knit Crate was unable to get their fiber shipped to them so that they could have it dyed and get it out. So they were scrambling, and they contacted Rebecca Brown of ChemKnits on YouTube, who is she basically teaches people how to dye yarn. She has a huge channel of dyeing videos that are really quite good. And
I've heard a lot about her. She comes highly recommended.
Yeah, I mean, it's like if you're at all interested in yarn dyeing, or even find it just fascinating to see the process, she's so thorough about how she explains the process and the pitfalls you can run into, as well as the really cool things that happen out of it. So Knit Crate decided that they were going to do a dye your own Knit Crate month, and at first I was like, ugh, this is not what I spent my money for. But then I started watching her videos, and I became really intrigued and excited, and really wanted to do it. So I got that crate, and it came with 2 hanks of merino, superwash merino based yarn, and a couple of packets of Kool-Aid. I had been, I watched her entire compendium of videos on Kool-Aid
Mhm.
dyeing. I was ready to go, and I had a blast doing it. I loved it. The colors turned out really cool, and I basically got hooked from that point forward. So I started buying blank yarn and food coloring to start with, because I didn't know how far down that rabbit hole I was going to go. Plus, during 2020, I was unemployed. So I was living off of a severance package, which I was, I spent 20 years at a company in Kansas City. And then when I was laid off, I got basically a year's salary. So it kept me and my family, comfortable for that year. And so, I bought a little bit of, blank yarn, and uh, was just doing the food coloring thing, and was having just a blast at it. Then I did finally get employed earlier this year, and decided, okay, I'm going to make the switch from food coloring over to professional acid dyes. So um, one of those stimulus checks came in, and so did a whole bunch of blank yarn and some acid dyes, and off we went. And I started realizing I'm dyeing more yarn than I can use. And even though it's a great way of building your stash, and I was like, okay, I need to start getting rid of some of this. And so I decided to open up an Etsy store. And then as I did that, I was like, I want to do something more than just sell off, random skeins of yarn. I want to actually kind of do something a bit more thoughtful and produced, I guess. And so that's kind of where the whole yarn dyeing thing has started. And so far it's going well.
I think that sounds great, and I'm thinking of like two or three different things to talk about offline, um, separate from this interview,
Sure.
because I have some yarn that was given to me by a dear friend, a wonderful, wonderful person, um, that it's hand spun and undyed, and I'm afraid to touch it because I think I'm going to ruin it. So I don't know what to do with it. I'm afraid to even try the most basic amateur dyeing techniques because I
Mm-hmm.
think I'm gonna just mess it up. Because knowing me, I will.
Well, the key thing to know there is what type of fiber it is. I assume it's protein. Is it superwash or non-superwash? Superwash you can be a little more aggressive with, and I use that term very guarded. Aggressive meaning you don't go crazy with it, but you can agitate it to some extent. Whereas non-superwash, you have to treat it very, very gently so that you're not felting it and turning it into just a lump of mess.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, often I have often said that I started with like the budget yarns, and
Mm-hmm.
my tastes have become more expensive, although my budget hasn't. But my uh, when I get the nicer yarns, sometimes I'm afraid to use them because I think I'm going to ruin them. So that's where I go with this particular um, undyed yarn, because I don't want to ruin it, because it's pretty precious, because for one thing it was a gift,
Mm-hmm.
and for another thing the person who gave it to me is someone who is very dear to me. So I don't know, I feel like I'm afraid to make a mistake, and I know that's a typical human emotion, and I hate
Sure.
being typical. I hate being normal, you know. But so yeah, I think we could have a number of conversations offline about that.
Oh,
But
sure. Sure.
I mean, in fact, I would love to know about things that you have learned, mistakes you've made and grown from in the dying, in learning to die. I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, it's yeah, one of the things that I've had to sort of get over is my fear of messing up. And it's ultimately, I think most dyers, well, and really most knitters and fiber artists reach a point where it's like, if I don't like it, I'm sure someone else will. And so, I have some skeins that I'm like this one. I'm not crazy about it,
I
but
love it.
I know exactly. There's an aspect of it I do like, but when I had an idea of what I thought it was going to be, and it went here instead. But it's nice. I'm sure it will make a great something, a shawl, a pair of socks. I don't know what. Um,
So that particular skein in your hand, what weight is it, and how many skeins
um,
do you have? How many yards in total?
it's a fingering weight yarn. It's let's see, 75/25, so it's a basic sock weight. Superwash merino nylon, and it's the only one. It's a one of a kind.
Uh,
It's one of my early experiments with acid dyes. Just
but still, I like it. I don't know what
yeah,
I could do with that number of yards because crochet is really a yarn hog.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I don't
So it's
knit.
about,
Knitting is a mystery to me.
let's see, it's about
Um,
460 yards.
I can make a hat out of
Yeah,
460
exactly. It'd make
yards.
about a
Yeah,
hat. But yeah,
especially with like such a lightweight
mhm.
yarn. But
Yeah, right now my heaviest weight is DK. But
DK is now my favorite weight. I used to be a worsted boy.
I know I
Um,
used to be all about the worsted weight yarns, and then I really didn't start using fingering weight until I moved, started doing more, um, started doing lace knitting, and I used to do lace knitting on worsted weight yarn. I always thought that was fun to do, is take a lace pattern and completely blow it out into this huge
oh
piece,
wow.
which
Oh,
was
that
fun.
could be really cool. Yeah.
Yeah, it was
So
fun to do.
I've most recently I've been looking at like really intricate knitted patterns and looking at how can I make that happen in crochet. And
Hmm.
so I need really, really lightweight yarns, lighter than I'm accustomed to working with. And so, I mean, there mistakes will be made, I can promise you that, but it's going to be an interesting learning experience.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so,
So
so, um, so with the knitting, you say you knit, you don't crochet at all?
I don't. I know the basics of crochet, and in fact, my earliest fiber experiences were with crochet. My
Okay.
mother used to do, the basic chevron blanket out of Red Heart, the basic, the striped chevron blankets, and I remember doing two or three rows. She'd be working on one, and she'd put it down, and I'd go pick it up, and because I'd watched her intently, and I would do a couple of rows, and it just never, I don't know, crochet just never clicked with me at that point. I picked it up at here and there, and I did, like, I think when I was about like 12 I tried knitting, and it was like, this is too weird, I don't get this at all. So it wasn't until I was an adult that I really got into the fiber world.
Oh, well, when we get married, we'll figure that out. Um,
Yeah, my husband might have something to say about that, but we'll
well,
work something out.
we'll figure out something, yes. Um, but actually, I started as part of a bisexual couple because I got him started knitting really because he had another hobby that annoyed me. So I got him a beginner's knitting kit, and he took off with it and ran and became an expert. And then
Yeah,
he
that
encouraged
happens
me to pick up
sometimes.
crochet.
Yep. So yeah,
Uh,
that's knitting has been my thing for since 2005. There's almost never a point I'm not don't have a I used to be a monogamous knitter, and now I'm very much uh, polyamorous with my with my fiber.
so do you create designs and patterns?
I have dabbled in the design world. I have a few up on Ravelry, but I would not consider myself in any way a designer. Um, I have designed enough that I understand how precious they are and what they have to go through to be able to publish a good pattern that is easy to read and without mistakes. So and simply the the imagination side of it. What stitch patterns am I going to bring together to create whatever shape I'm trying to go for. Um, that's not just something that happens. It requires a lot of forethought and a lot of practicing of putting different stitch patterns together to see how it's going to look with the different weights of yarn and different colors. And so it's just a lot of things to think through that I think some people don't realize how much goes into creating a pattern that is actually useful. um, the folks that are out there like the Stephen Wests in the world that seem to put out these gargantuan amazing pieces of art every 3 or 4 months. I'm just like, uh, what, where does that come from? How do you do that?
Well, they all make it seem easy, but you never see the work that's behind it. And I'm
Yeah.
trying to keep up a certain number of patterns per month or per year
Mm-hmm.
that I introduce because Daddy needs pattern sales.
Yeah, exactly. Go
Yeah,
out, buy a pattern.
yeah. Um, so and honestly, when you create something and you get really good feedback about it, that's better than feedback about a finished object, in my mind.
Oh, well, sure, because more and only so. I mean, people are going to visually appreciate your finished object, and maybe one person will enjoy the use of it. Whereas a pattern, thousands of people over for the rest of time may possibly be able to
We
enjoy that
hope.
pattern. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I in many ways, as a musician, or and having come from the music world, I equate much of my fiber experience um, to my music experience. That designers are very much like composers, and the knitters and the crocheters are the performers of that piece of work that then put that out into the world, and they bring um, their own nuance to the piece as they perform it and as they create it for the masses to then ingest in some way.
Do you know, I used to compare it with music also because I was trained in opera and uh, poorly trained, but that's a separate issue. But um, the I would compare design with or even just variation on design. I would say that I would compare it to interpreting of a standard um, uh, piece of music that we all
Mm-hmm.
know. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I could sing Una furtiva lagrima until the cows come home. And actually, nowadays, if I try to sing it, I'll drive the cows away. But um, but in the day, people were trained so that they could, in theory, they could spontaneously come up with all of these um, um, completely original ornaments on what was originally what's on the page.
Right.
And I have worked with people usually younger than myself who seem to be married to what is on the page in black and white, and they don't understand the world that was there in the late 18th and early 19th century,
Well,
where that
and
was
even
just
and especially performance, performance further back was much more ornamented and
exactly,
at the whim of the performer
exactly,
to
exactly.
add all sorts of runs and trills and melismatic aspects to the piece of work.
Yeah, exactly. And I used to say that you know with music, with vocal music, I would call myself an effective interpreter.
Hmm.
No one doubted my taste, my interpretation, my musicality. I didn't think that I could be original, and then I learned that I could.
Hmm. Hmm.
And as far as patterns go, I started out, my very beginning was with a pattern that I don't know, I had gotten online from a tutorial,
Hmm.
and I started making changes and more changes and more changes. And by the end, it was more of my changes than the original pattern. And I'm going,
Right.
wait, I've got my own design here.
Exactly. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that was,
It
that,
makes one of the aspects that, at least as I was designing and or starting to do some designs primarily for myself, um, was thinking, all right, is this original? And and I think a lot of designers, just like composers, struggle with that. Is this original, or am I simply copying something from someone else? Well, a symphony, a classical symphony has a particular structure to it, and that structure then gives you the boundaries in which you then take different motifs and ideas and thoughts and put them together and string them together into different themes. And the same thing happens, I think, with designers. Is you take different stitch patterns and combine them in a way that is different and unique within a structure, like a triangular shawl.
yeah.
There's only so many ways to knit or crochet a triangular shawl, but
And,
it's what are you going to do with that structure? What are you going to put onto that is uniquely yours?
and there are 2 points there. First, um, back in the day, composers copied themselves. They copied each other.
They copied everybody.
I mean, do you know how many variations you can find of "For unto us a child is born"? You
Exactly.
know, you can find it in love duets. You can find it everywhere. It's the
Hmm.
same thing with how many variations on a granny square cardigan are you gonna find? You
Exactly.
know
Yeah.
what? I just published one, and by golly, I wanted to sell because I think it's beautiful, and I got compliments when I wore it to a yarn festival. So,
So exactly.
did I
So
mention Daddy needs pattern sales? Yeah. Um, uh, but yeah, it's true. I mean, nowadays we're afraid of touching on somebody else's intellectual property, but granny squares are not intellectual property. Granny squares have been there since the dawn of time.
right.
You know, double treble crochets, they've been there since the dawn of time. I've got um, a tank top that I'm ready to publish that is, the only thing I need is really good photographs, really. Um, but it's made of double treble crochets. Um, So, like they used to say, there's nothing new under the sun, or the more things change, the more things stay the
It's
same.
the same. Yeah. And well, and what's interesting is that one of the things I have learned is that in the dyeing world, it's the same thing. There's this fear of um, your yarn looking too much like somebody else's yarn, and so you don't watch anybody else's dyeing videos in fear that your colorways will start looking like their colorways, and then they'll get, and
Hmm.
naming conventions also get to be interesting. It's like,
Yeah.
but then again, brown is brown, right? It's like whether you call it leather or uh, whatever else you might call it.
Yeah, then you come into the kind of uh, colorway naming things that auto manufacturers will do with like burnt sienna or heather or autumn mist or something like that.
Yes. Yeah. So I've kind of broken that whole world by just I called it, let's see, my brown is perseverance. Okay, but I have a reason for calling it perseverance. So it's for me, my latest project is, of course, the Stephen West mystery knit along shawlography, and so I dyed up my own set of colors for that. And so this is my dark brown color. So it's a very fall type of color. Has very tonal, has a reddish hue to the end of it.
Looks beautiful.
But my thought behind it was, it's like a either the ground or or more like a tree. A good solid tree that bends but doesn't break. So it perseveres no matter what the season. It's still there, regardless whether it loses its leaves or not. It's there. It perseveres. So most of my colorway names are more than just um, some variation of the color it is. I try to put something a bit deeper, more thoughtful to
Like
it.
that. I like that. And with that particular one, you go back a few uh, centuries, a few generations of the English language, and you find patience and perseverance made a bishop of his reverence. So I mean, I love that. I'm perhaps too much, but I love 19th century British lit and 18th century as well. So, to me, Jane Austen is a saint. So,
Yes. Well, yeah,
um,
I actually I really do like the late 19th century um, American authors myself, but Whitman
I
being,
would
of
go with
course,
you.
chief among my loves, especially when I was in college.
I saw an operatic setting of um, an American tragedy, which, of course, is called The Great American Novel.
Hmm.
Um, and it was a tremendous piece of theater. Musically, meh. But as far as a piece of theater, it
Hmm.
was amazing.
Cool.
And there were some really, really good singers too.
Oh,
So
that's always a plus.
yeah, I've actually been pretty fortunate there. In um, one of my other identities, I have done a lot of opera reviews. Um, so in fact, tomorrow I get to go and see another one.
Oh, cool.
I'm going to drive down to Charleston, um, which is about 3 or 4 hours from me. I'm in
Hmm.
Wilmington, so so it should be fun. I don't get to write about music as much as I used to, and I miss it.
Mm.
It's
Well, yeah,
it's
and especially over the past couple of years, it's the
yeah.
especially the classical musical world has been hard hit by the inability to gather in large numbers.
Do you know what, though? I have found some streaming and recorded performances online where they have done absolutely brilliant adaptations
Yeah,
of the
I've seen
limitations
some
of.
really interesting online online groups that perform via via Zoom and internet connections that have been quite movingly done,
Yeah, exactly.
and
And
even
yeah,
large choral works done in that fashion, which are tough.
I saw a performance of Fidelio, and I mean, most of Fidelio, you can imagine people being at a distance from each other, but there was a point where I'm gonna get misty now.
Uh,
Uh, where Florestan so wanted to move out of that little 6x6 box that was clearly defined by red tape on the stage. But
mhm.
he really, really wanted to move out of that box to embrace Leonora, who had saved his life, just
Mhm.
now. And I mean, that struggle itself
Yeah.
just added so much to the whole drama of the story.
Yeah. Yeah. That's one of the things as I've lived, it's interesting to see how limitations on art often will bring about um, a level of artistry that is entirely new and different and more expressive. Those periods of those periods of time where art is not appreciated and it is and the money is not flowing in the direction of artists, that that's oftentimes when, because of the struggle, that's often when art will expand and grow in terms of going in a new direction or doing something more, um, I don't know, more daring, because they're pushing against those struggles. And that
Exactly.
sometimes when you have the more, I'm going to say it, the more liberal uh, uh, giving to the arts community, they become more complacent, and
That
there's
can happen.
less because they have less to struggle against.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of, I've seen that through music history and through theater history, that oftentimes when it's the hardest to do the work is when the best work comes out, because people have to really
Exactly.
want it.
Exactly. Wasn't it Poulenc? I think it was Poulenc who said that anyone can come up with something new, but it takes real talent or genius or whatever it was, whatever the term it was that he used, to come up with something new within the old constraints.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
Poulenc himself was an amazing example of that.
Hmm.
I mean, I'm a huge fan. I produced um, a production of La Voix Humaine, and I have sung many, many of his choral works,
Hmm.
and I just can't get enough.
Yeah.
Um, I would love to have been a part of like dialogues of the Carmelites. Oh my God. Oh my
Yeah.
God.
Kind of one of those, yes, it makes you think, from a fiber standpoint. The kind of the period that we're in now is, it feels very uh, robust in terms of uh, opportunities to be in the fiber community. That knitting and crochet and yarn dyeing are extremely popular right now. I mean, here in Wichita, Kansas, there are I think 4 or 5 indie dyers in this small area. So it's like there seems to be this sort of I don't know about renaissance, but there's a new popularity of fiber arts going on over the last probably about 5 years, that has just really sort of expanded and grown. And I think last year, because people were relegated to entertaining themselves at home, a lot of people turned to fiber arts, and home-based types of activities that are doing nothing but sort of help expand what we do. And I know a lot of people that started yarn dyeing during the pandemic and now have businesses that they're doing, sort of like mine. A lot of people started YouTube channels like I did last year, to connect with people. I mean, personally, I didn't connect with a lot of people in the fiber world until I started a YouTube channel and started watching a lot of other YouTube channels. And I started realizing, wow, there's a lot of guys out there who knit and crochet and spin and dye and do all these fiber things. And, I was just doing my little knitting thing up in Kansas City in my little home without any connection really to the fiber world at large.
Yeah.
So it's really been this aspect of being confined within your own four walls that has, I think, caused people to push out from those boundaries in new ways to connect with people in different ways. And I think our connections in the fiber world are stronger today than they may have been 2-3 years ago.
I think that is completely true. We've seen a huge expansion in every part of the fiber community and in every part of the social media community as well. And then I think that it's all going to settle down as this whole pandemic issue, whatever the new normal is going to be, we become accustomed to it. And, we still don't know what that's going to be, and we don't have to know today. But, we're going to get used to it, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And then people who started doing, or I won't say everyone, but some people who started doing these things out of boredom, they're going to let go of them because they have other things. But then there are going to be a lot of us, like I think you and me, who found, a new, I don't know if mission is the right word, but a purpose, something to. Okay, let's go back to mission. From the isolation, because isolation was never a problem for me. I could do that all day
Me
long.
either. Yeah, I'm very much an introvert personality.
Exactly. Yeah, but the community in the social media that we have found, and within the fiber community that we have found, through branching out and reaching out and doing our own things and expressing ourselves, I think it's very strong for very many of us. And there are those for whom it was equally strong, but they're able to go back to their old lives.
Yeah.
I myself didn't have an old life. I was unemployed before this happened.
Yeah.
I was sick and unemployed before this happened. So this was a good thing for me.
Yeah.
In certain ways. So,
yeah, for me, as like my day job is I'm a corporate educator. So I teach people. I teach adults, soft skills, hard, computer skills, you name it. I've taught them. And so when I became unemployed, my job became job hunting during a pandemic, which, as you can imagine, was very futile. So one of the reasons I started my YouTube channel, which is Great Scott Knitting, was basically to keep up my presentation skills and to continue to connect with people in some way. And I did a lot of things in my early episodes that were very much educational, educating myself, but then sharing what I learned online. So basically keeping my skills up and having something to do other than just, fill out applications and then have them rejected. or have an interview and say, oh, you're great, you're perfect, we're not hiring. So there was a lot of that. So it really that for me, this past couple of years has been a deeper immersion in my passion for fiber, my passion for knitting, and it's become more of a passion for connecting with other fiber artists and as well. And so, the fact that you asked me to do this interview, and just a couple of weeks ago, Irina Shar and I had a conversation as well. I'm just like, it kind of baffles me that this is happening, but then again, it's also really, I'm embracing that, these possibilities of connecting with people this way.
Okay, then let's say 5 or 10 years from now, where do you envision yourself or Mount Carmel Yarns? Or
well, let's see. In 10 years, I will be 65 and retiring in some way or fashion or another. And if it hasn't become something even more pronounced in my life, one of my thoughts is at least one of my retirement gigs is going to be doing more yarn dyeing, making it much more a bigger part of my my life, to just to keep doing cool things. Is very well that might happen before then. Right now, my daytime gig is teaching on Medicare. So, in a sense, what I'm learning is that when I turn 65, I can start selling Medicare plans to people that are my own age, and that's how I'll keep my keep money flowing in, and then my yarn dyeing business can also sort of take off then as well. But
so then
for me, the next 10 years is going to be, continuing to do, what I want to do in terms of yarn dyeing. But yeah, I'm going to be, keeping a day job as well.
So what if the corporate world knocks on your door tomorrow and says, we want you back at 60 hours a week?
The pay would have to be extraordinary. For me, a balance of life is important. I have no trouble giving 40 to 45 hours a week, but beyond that, you can't pay me enough. There's no amount of knitting that'll keep me sane if I have to work beyond that point.
Yeah, good answer.
Even though I love what I do, and when I'm doing it, I'm focused in on that. But at the end of the day, that laptop closes and my other laptop opens, and my knitting comes out, and my yarn. It's like if I have orders that I need to fill, I get to those, and that's how I keep my balance. Is I actually all of my corporate career has been that way. I leave the work life at work and my home life is my entire focus becomes whatever I'm doing in that moment.
That sounds like a good balance.
Yeah,
Yeah.
as actually one of my bosses says today, there's no such thing as work-life balance. There's only life and what you focus on. And if if you're at work and you give 100% of your focus to that work, that will allow you to, when that work day is done, then you can give 100% of your focus to the other aspects of your life. So that,
Yeah.
and then it's easier to, I don't know if you keep them separate, but you don't lose focus from where you're at and what you're doing, if you've
When I
given
was
that
in the
focus
corporate
correctly.
world, I I I would have managers, some of whom were younger than me, and nowadays everybody's younger than me, um, um, who would ask me, why do I put in all of those hours? Because, they're noticing them because I put them on the timesheet. I don't get paid extra, but I put them on the timesheet. Um, Maybe they can, charge the client extra for them. I don't know. But, and they would ask me, why are you doing that? And I didn't have an answer.
Mhm.
But, now, I'll be 59 in December. So I'm, what is that, 6 weeks away from my birthday?
Mhm.
Okay. As we say here in North Carolina. Um, it's, I have a little bit of perspective now, and I use. I won't say that everything has like come together in the to like come to the same direction, but what I want to do now, I can draw from my experience doing this, my experience doing that.
Mhm.
Everything that I've learned, or a lot that I've learned, a lot that I should have learned over time in my corporate career, and try to build something now. And um, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like you're saying something similar to that.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think we're all, we are all products of the experiences that we have had, both positive and negative. So very much the choices that we make throughout life put us where we're at in the given moment. Um, and that's why, it's in, for me, that's why it's important to maintain a focus on, sort of the Yoda, keep your mind on where you are and what you're doing. As you can tell, from my Star Wars
Easier
world,
said
my
than done.
philosophy comes
Does
from
it?
Yoda. When you do that, then you reap the benefits of that focus. And um, the more you are able to, make good choices about how to spend your time and where to give your focus in life, um, creates a better future and a better moment that you're in. Um, and that's kind of I have gotten to a point in my life in, my mid 50s. I hope to think that maybe it had started a little bit before now, but I'm starting to realize that things that I learned in my, throughout my corporate career, things that I've learned in relationships that I've had, have made me, even though there have been failures and there have been things that if I could go back and do, I might do differently. Um, they have brought me where I'm at and put me in, given me the perspective that I currently have, which I think, for me right now, I'm in a good place, in terms of how I view the world. And
I'm hearing that from you.
yeah,
I'm hearing.
and the
It
thing is,
really sounds like you're in a good place. I'm sorry, I missed what you just said.
no, I would say some aspects of that go into the work that I do as a knitter and as a dyer. Um, I I think maybe one of the things that for me that sets me apart in my mind from other dyers is um, the thought that I put into the colors that I create and the naming conventions that I put on those colors as well, and the thought that I put into it. Not that other dyers don't put tons of thought and energy and into the work that they do, but um, for me, that it's more than just creating a new colorway. It's creating a colorway that has intention, that creates a memory or invokes a memory. Uh, it becomes, that's just one of those things that for me, that's how I see myself, maybe uniquely different from the next dyer down the road.
I think that's wonderful. I think that's great. We have been talking for almost an hour. It really doesn't seem like it. It's been such a pleasure, and it's gone by so fast.
Yeah, yeah,
So
it
if
has
we're
been
going
fun.
to close now, what do you want people to remember about you? What do you want to tell them in terms of identity, in terms of contact, in terms of anything else?
Um, let's see. What do I want people to take away from me? That you know, in whatever it is that you do, either for work or for joy, if it's a fiber art, if you're a dyer, if you're a knitter, if you're a crocheter, uh, just really enjoy every moment of it. Life's too short not to. And when you enjoy what you do, other people are going to feel that joyful energy in whatever it is that you share to the rest of the world. Um, for me, that is in a sense, the essence of the yarns that I dye. I'm wanting to share my joy of color and fiber and what you can do with the tools that I am able to provide you that bring you joy, that inspire a memory or create a memory for someone else. Um, that and I hope that those things that I do, either through my YouTube channel or my yarn, um, is inspirational, gives someone that impetus to do something new and creative. That's
Wow.
kind of in a nutshell. That's where I am in my little fiber world.
I don't think I can top that. I think you're amazing.
Oh, well,
And I want to thank you for doing this. And I want to thank everybody who's been watching us through this whole thing. Um, so to those people who are watching, I would just say, um, like, subscribe, comment, share, all the standard YouTube crap, and keep coming back. I'm going to click end now, but stick around because I
yeah,
want to talk to you. Um,
sure.